everyone and welcome to another Stargate lore video. Today we're going to be talking about the spirits. To be clear on something, this video is mostly going to be about the spirits and not the Salish whom they share a world with. It's not that there's no lore on them, there's actually more than I thought. For example, did you know that their real name is not the Salish? That's just the culture Daniel said they descended from. Their real name is the Stole. This and a lot of the other extended lore in these groups I'm going to cover comes from the RPG books. But they're not as intertwined as the Sarakin and Hebrideans are. I also know my audience is more interested in the aliens, so I want to give the Stole their own video at a later date. I also know you guys enough, so don't worry, I'm not going to call them the Stole throughout the video. With all that out of the way, let's talk about the spirits.
Kaya, my friend. Your coat shines beautifully today.
We don't know much about the history of the spirits. We know that they evolved on PXY 887. We also learned in the 2021 RPG missions that the species does in fact have a name, the Neda. Despite having access to the Stargate, they seem content to stay on their homeworld. However, we do know of at least 3 who would leave to explore the stars. These 3 being Puck, Oberon, and Titania, who spent the next millennia exploring the universe, freeing an enslaved race, and helping Shakespeare write A Midsummer Night's Dream? As well as starring in the first performance of the play. Not going to lie, I always assumed that in Stargate, stories of fairy-like creatures were the result of the Nox, but I can see the Neda and other aliens filling this role. Sometime after these 3 left, centuries before the SGC made contact, a Goa'uld, whose name I believe is pronounced Amonkin, stumbled upon the world. The Neda chose not to reveal themselves or do anything about him at first, not wanting to spark a conflict. The hope was he would move on and not return. Unfortunately, he discovered trinium, a very useful element that is 100 times lighter and stronger than steel when refined. Believing this element could increase his power, he decided to set up shop, bringing with him human slaves from the Pacific Northwest. The Neda were disgusted by Amonkin's treatment of his human slaves, and they struck without warning. Using their vanishing technology, which we will get into later, Amonkin found his defenses infiltrated, and within a blink of an eye, his Jaffa, servants, and himself disappeared into nothingness. The only remains of his time on the planet being the crumbling spires and domes of his base. The Neda were left in an awkward position after this event, as they were not really sure what to do with their new neighbors. They had no desire to rule over them or interfere with their natural development, so they decided to let them be and develop as best they could on this new home. Though I do want to note, based on something Zell said, there may have been some fear of the Salish. And that idea might not be unfounded, as the humans were not the only things the Goa'uld brought to the world. See, there's this joke among Stargate fans that most planets look like the woods of Canada. Now, the real-world reason for this is because that's where all the filming was done, but in the Friends and Foes RPG, we learned that when the Goa'uld came to this planet, they brought various animals and plant species. Since their liberation from the Goa'uld, the Salish and native Earth life have spread several hundred miles from the gate. And unfortunately, the native life on this world is not compatible with earthly biology. As for the Salish, the further they travel, the plants grow more strange and game becomes scarce. I like this idea. That, at least on Goa'uld worlds, they brought invasive species that took over the area, and that's why so many worlds share similar flora to Earth's. The Neda tolerate this for the sake of the Salish, but have turned the infested area into a sort of game preserve, removing all evidence of their civilization from a vast area around the Stargate, about the size of Australia. Only the Neda qualified to deal with the Salish are allowed to enter the area, essentially becoming park rangers who also serve as a response team if anything comes through the gate. These park rangers would take on the names and forms of the Salish spirits and work in harmony with the Salish people. It's possible these names are similar to titles that get passed down, but I'm not confident to say this is 100% true. In the RPG book, it said that the Zells we see in the show is not the first. and that the first one was the one who liberated the Salish from the Goa'uld. But based on how the Zels we see talks, I got the sense he was the one who banished the Goa'uld. This lines up with how the Asgardian Goa'uld names work, and given how long the Nereidas seem to live, one of them has been studying the Salish for 700 years, this would make sense. But I'll leave you to voice your thoughts in the comments below. The spirits would provide the Salish with trinium, or as they call it, ki, from the mountain into the river. The Salish used it in almost every aspect of their civilization, from weapons to decorations. They would also communicate with the spirits regularly, either seeking advice, or in the case of Tanani, just general conversation.
My great-great-grandfather used to call up the spirits that way. But one day, Zales just said, call my name. And that's what we do.
Though the spirits would try to limit some of these interactions and not help too much, in fear of the Salish becoming too dependent on them, or worse, start asking questions. They would exist in this harmony until 1998 when Earth came knocking. During a routine exploration mission, SG-11 discovered the element, and upon discovering what the pure form of the element could do, they were ordered to collect more samples. But the Salish and spirits were none too pleased with the method of mining, and so Tanani asked them to stop. But they had already set hot charges, and any conversation would have to wait until after the explosion. Well, it turns out that wasn't the right answer, as the spirits did their whole vanishing thing, and told Tanani to shoot arrow through the Stargate to send the message to stay away. This naturally didn't work, and SG-1, Minos O'Neill, who got hit with the arrow, traveled to the world and made contact with the Salish. And with the aid of Tanani, after talking to the spirits,
A little flatter couldn't hurt, Sam.
My, what big eyes you have.
they were convinced to let SG-11 go. Sam tried to negotiate some kind of mining agreement, but the Salish elders felt that the SGC's mining methods were too destructive and wasteful, and the problem with any trade agreement is it would never be in any practical amount. Tanani traveled to the SGC to view their less damaging mining methods, but he felt those methods were just as damaging. After he left with Daniel to learn more about the Salish origins on Earth,
From here?
I'll show you.
and Hammond revealed that the NID had made a proposal that when the Salish migrated south for the winter, they would move in again to mine the trinium.
Is anyone at the Pentagon or along the chain of command remotely concerned about their Aboriginal rights, repeating history, that annoyingly pesky moral stuff?
However, it turns out it was not SG-11 that came back with them, but the spirits who had assumed their form, and they just heard what the Earthlings were planning to do. As such, they went around the base doing the vanishing thing, with the intentions to make sure no one escaped the base and destroy it. However, their leader Zels was injured, and Daniel agreed to take the spirits to him in exchange for hearing them out.
How do I know you're really Daniel?
Because.
Yeah, okay.
After Zels was healed, he accused the SGC of two aggressions, planning to steal from the Salish and revealing their true nature to Tanani. O'Neill tried to make the promise that they wouldn't steal from them, but the spirits point out that even if they trusted his word, there was no guarantee that his leaders would honor O'Neill's oath. So O'Neill had a great idea.
So don't take my word. Shut down your Stargate. That way, no one will be able to come to your planet unless you allow it.
This worked for the spirits since they have no need of star travel. As for the second transgression, while they made some good points about not wanting to interfere with the Salish's natural evolution, keeping harmony, and fear that the Salish would turn on them, O'Neill pointed out that if they really did trust the Salish, then they should be honest with them and not pose as their spirits.
You have always been kind to my people. So, whatever makes you happy.
And so the spirits and Tanani would return to PXY 887.
Oh, wait.
What about our friends?
Your friends are right beside you, Daniel.
While they presumably shut down the gate after this, we do know some events that happened afterward. It seems that things have not changed much, and the Salish still live in harmony with the spirits. In fact, the friendship between these two seems to have deepened with their revelation. For example, Takaya, the spear who turned into a wolf, has been spending more time among the Salish in her true form, but will happily revert to her lupin one for the Salish who are uncomfortable with her new shape. We also learned some Salish are curious about their Earth cousins, and Tanani would welcome them back if they ever returned. Sadly, this is where the story of the spirits ends, but not the Nereida, as their story continued with Puck. As I said earlier, Puck and his two friends had left their world. At some point, they helped free a race the Goa'uld had enslaved and experimented on called the Minos. As a result of Goa'uld experiments, they developed a genetic condition. When a Minos reached a certain age, they would physically and mentally transform into a monster that the Goa'uld would use in their wars. The trio had freed them, and Puck managed to create a serum that would halt the transformation. He brought some to Earth, which is where the stories of satyrs come from, but would resell the whole race on P6H970. He seems to have traveled to Earth a few times, the last being in the 80s. In 2002, the Phoenix 1 visited P6H970 and met Puck, but their first meeting wasn't the best. Puck felt the Tau'ri and Phoenix Alliance were like children, running around pretending to be adults, all the while awakening great evils or stirring them to action when they normally would just sit on their thrones. Which, if you consider the Wraith and Ori, not wrong. He claimed to have the power to shut down Earth's and the Phoenix base's Stargates. Actually, quick side tangent, he specifically says he could shut down those gates as well as anywhere else if he wished. Okay, why don't you then? Like, the Goa'uld kill and enslave a lot of people and heavily rely on gate travel. Sure, they have ships, but theoretically, if you shut down all the Stargates, or all the gates in their control, their empire's power would be greatly diminished. So I'm going to call Puck's bluff because either A, he's lying and is not as powerful as he claims, or B, he's a jack because he does have all this power, but instead of using it to fight the big empire going around enslaving, killing everything that moves, he's playing Q and building a group of people who are actively trying to stop the Goa'uld. Anyway, ran over, Phoenix 1 manages to pass his test, and he sends them on their way. And 1 year later, he decided to come to their aid when the Phoenix base was threatened. Nereida biology is interesting for various reasons. In their natural forms, they are humanoid, being roughly 6 feet in height and weighing approximately 250 pounds. They also appear to have two sexes, male and female, but little is known of their mating or family practices. Obviously, the biggest difference between humans and Nereida is the gills present on their face. The book indicates this may be a result of an amphibious origin, as they can both survive on land and in the water, with the gills letting them stay underwater for an indefinite period of time, though this is only if it is fresh water. As I said earlier, the native life on their planet is not compatible with Earth life, though I don't really know what this means. If the native life on PXY-887 just can't stand up to the invasive Earth life, or if this is like in Mass Effect, where you can have species that are dextro and levo-amino based, where one can't consume the food of the other. Again, I'm not really sure what this means, and I'll be interested to see your thoughts in the comments. Something to note is that it is stated that the Nereida are comparable to humans in basic physical strength and intellect, which means unlike, say, the Asgard, who have a higher intellect than humans,
we are no longer capable of such thinking.
The Nereida are not inherently more intelligent than a human. Their civilization has just been around for so long that what we might consider to be super advanced here on Earth is just common knowledge or technology for them. I think a good comparison is how you watching this video might know the basics on how to use an Amazon gift card, but your parents might not, and you have to spend 45 minutes explaining to them how to use it. On an unrelated note, since they're physically comparable to a human, this means you could win in a fistfight with them, assuming you didn't have to deal with their tech. Though if you want to gain some advantage in a theoretical fight, the Nereida do appear to have a weakness to electrical attacks. Zil was shot with a Zat and it nearly killed him, when normally a single shot is only supposed to stun a person. And in the RPG book, spirits suffer double damage from a source of electrical damage and a critical hit with any electrical base attack. It will also inflict a temporary constitution damage equal to half of the damage inflicted. Though I admit I'm not sure if this is due to their biology or if it has something to do with these silver robes they wear, which we will get to when we cover technology. But what I will say is if you get into a fight with a Neda, bring a taser. A big difference between humans and Neda is their lifespans. We don't know how long Neda can live, but their lifespans seem to stretch into at least thousands, if not hundreds of years. Though whether this is due to their natural biology or advanced life-extending technology, I can't say. On that note, I want to comment on their shape-shifting abilities. Now, it would be very easy to assume that this and some of the other feats we see them do are a result of some near-ascendant powers similar to the Nox. However, after doing some research, I found that these abilities are most likely a result of their advanced technology, and it's possible that they have no ascendant abilities. For example, their shape-shifting abilities, specifically changing into smaller forms, can theoretically only be done with an energy-to-matter conversion, which would require some form of technology. But this is a science fiction story, and anything is possible in fiction. And on Puck's wiki page, it is stated that the Neda do have some abilities, though never specified. So I may be wrong, but I'm going to list most of the abilities in the next section, which is... I know I usually do society next, but the transition from biology to technology seemed a lot easier for this one. There's a quote from Arthur C. Clarke. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. The Neda are one of the races encountered by the SGC who fit this description. As such, while we don't get a lot of details on their tech, we know they are very advanced. Two of the biggest examples we have of said tech is their shapeshifting and teleportation/vanishing technology. The source of these powers is not entirely known, but a dominant theory is that the silvery robes the Neda wear incorporate technological devices into them that gives them these abilities. This theory is further helped by the anti-tamper devices in the robe that prevent any non-Neda from using them. And it would be a fair guess to assume that most of their tech is based on trinium. For their shapeshifting abilities, they can change their form into seemingly anything, from animals of various sizes and other beings. It is important to note that when the spirits took on the forms of SG-11, they were able to impersonate the individuals in conversation, which means the spirits have some technology that would allow them to scan the memories to keep up the disguise. While this technology is quite powerful, there is a side effect. If a spirit spends too long in the form of an animal, they will develop the mannerisms and attitudes of the animal. They won't go feral or anything, but a common thing they will develop is the body language of said animal. As for their teleporting powers, while we did see them use this at least once to teleport themselves, the more prevalent use of this technology we see from them is making their enemies vanish. How this works is that the Neda shifts people into a pocket dimension called Limbo, with either a glance or a wave of their hands. This limbo may be the same subspace used by the Nox that was established in the Season 1 sourcebook. Interestingly, while the Neda think no time passes in limbo, it does, but at a very slow rate. Around 6 seconds in limbo is about 48 hours in normal space. And this is kind of an issue because if you remember from the history section, the spirits put some people in there and never took them out. Amonkin and his forces may be trapped there, but so much time has passed, about 600 years, those 6 seconds have added up. From Amonkin's perspective, it's only been about a few weeks. And when the spirits banished him to Limbo, they ended up sending some of his equipment with him. He's been working on a device that will free him from Limbo, and with any luck he can take his revenge on the spirits and conquer their world. Though at minimum he would like to be able to flee the planet and return to his old base of operations. However, given how much time has passed, most probably think he is dead, and therefore he wouldn't have much left as a power base. That being said, given what he knows about the spirits and their world, it may prove valuable enough to get some of that back. Just some minor tech we see from them, healing with a touch, though this seems to require several of them to perform, the ability to communicate telepathically with one another. After their first encounter with the Goa'uld, they developed a remote scanning technology that can detect the presence of a symbiote, and finally, the ability to activate a Stargate at will, which is something we've really only seen members of the Four Great Race Alliance do. Does that mean these guys are the Furlings?
No.
Nope.
Before we move on, we do know a bit about Puck's tech, which is a little different. He found a way to evolve the powers of his species, as well as finding tech that he was able to integrate into his body. One such tech being nanites, giving him masterful control to project illusions, manipulate objects, spy on others by capturing sound and visual images, and reconstructing living flesh. With all these upgrades, he learned how to control the Stargate network, and can move through the Stargates without activating them. How? Well, it's some higher tier version of his people's teleportation tech. We don't really know much about Nerida's society. There's a possibility that their society is hierarchical in nature, with those of lesser status deferring to their superiors. But this could be that these park rangers have a military-like structure to them that don't represent the whole of Nerida's society. Besides that, they seem to be a relatively passive people, since despite all the power they seem to have and ability to use the Stargate network at will, they seem to have no need for interplanetary travel, content to spend their long lives in contemplation and study. Though that's not true of all of them, since Puck and his friends left long ago to explore the stars. Interestingly, Puck does share a trait with the rest of the spirits that I find really interesting. I'm going to go into this more when I get into my thoughts section, but while the Nerida in general seem to be isolationists, similar to the Nox and Tolan, unlike those races, the Nerida are proactive in their defense of themselves and others. Again, I'm going to cover this more later, but I think this shows that while they want to be left alone, the Nerida do care about others, even if their methods can seem a bit extreme. We also get a sense that trust and oaths are important to them, as Takaya was willing to keep her promise to Daniel about hearing him out, even if Zels want to destroy them. One final note is that they do have a native language called Spirit, but due to centuries of close contact with the Salish, they can speak Ancient Salish. Which is cool, but, and I know we're not supposed to ask these questions, how is a group of Native Americans from the Pacific Northwest, who were taken off of Earth thousands, if not hundreds of years ago, speaking modern English?
Shut your mouth! No problem, Charlie. Shut the up, you Shut it!
Relationship-wise, we know the spirits get along very well with the Salish, acting as their protectors and friends. Though I do want to note there was a small fear from the spirits that the Salish would attack them if their true nature was revealed. So maybe the trust was not as strong as one would believe. They obviously dislike the Goa'uld, but I do want to note that while they sensed the symbiote inside of Teal'c, they did not immediately attack him. So they may be sympathetic to any Tok'ra or Rebel Jaffa they come across. And thanks to the actions of Puck, they would have good relations with any Minos. As for the SGC, the spirits are less trusting, since they saw how the Earthlings were planning on stealing from the Salish. That being said, they seem to trust Jack and Daniel, and in Jack's case, they see him as a friend due to his actions. On that note, fun fact, during the events of this episode, there was a Ritu named Mother present at the SGC, the Ritu being an insect-like species that is naturally invisible. I've done a video on them if you want more info. I don't think the spirits noticed her since they planned to destroy the base and made no move to have her leave. So I can't say how they felt about her, but given that after these events, she felt that Jack and SG-1 were the only honorable members of the SGC since they opposed the plan to steal from the Salish, to me this says that she and her faction, the central authority of the Ritu, probably would side with the spirits on the matter. And finally, there's no indication they know about groups like the Nox, Asgard, or Tolan, but I'd be very curious to see what would happen if they ever met. Would they be welcomed as friends, or the Nox and Tolan see them as too aggressive? In the process of working on this video, I've come to find I really like the spirits for two reasons. First is that their episode gave us the gift that is Tanani.
Does this mean I can go home?
Second is what makes them different from the Nox and Tolan. When threats came to the Nox or Tolan, they tried to take a middle-of-the-road neutral standpoint, not taking the threat seriously at all and shaming those who try not to be conquered. But the Neda don't do this. When the Goa'uld came to their world and they saw what was happening to the human slaves, they intervened. They also gave up a large chunk of their planet so the humans could live their own lives. When SG-11 came to the planet, they only attacked after the explosions went off. Later during the meeting, when Tanani says they can't mine the mountain, while Zales was disguised, he pointed out that the Salish were willing to share the trinium. Granted, this would never be enough for any practical use, but to me this indicates at least Zales is not opposed to Earth getting more advanced tech. He and the others only attacked when it became clear that the US government was planning on stealing the trinium. To me, this says that while they are isolationists, they are also protectors and helpers. They see evil in the world and work to stop it. We even see this with Puck and his friends when they freed the Minos. And he stayed with them, not only to make a cure to stop the transformation as it happens, but continues to work to find a permanent cure. Heck, despite my riff on him earlier, him testing Phoenix 1 comes from a genuine worry that they will hurt themselves or others by poking their heads in places they shouldn't. Which again, not wrong. And I'll give this to Puck, he tells them he's going to test them, unlike how the Grace aliens were shown in the short story Pleasure Cruise, where the test is, let's attack someone and take away their ability to defend themselves and see how a single person reacts. Overall, they're just a nice change of pace compared to some of the other races we have seen in the show. It's a little sad we didn't see them, or Tanani again, and they ended up being one of those races the writers sent to the barn, but given how powerful they are, I can see why they wouldn't be touched on again. And as to why a race this powerful didn't take on the Goa'uld Empire as a whole, I have to assume there was some reason. We did see a single shot from Azat nearly kill Zels, so maybe they're not as invincible as we think. Can you imagine what would happen if the Goa'uld got their hands on spirit tech? But what do you think? Do you like them and like to see them in the future? And which do you prefer, Neda or spirits? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below, leave a like and subscribe, follow me on my social medias, and remember...
But my spirits aren't evil. They don't rule us. They protect us.